Hi, my name is Anne. I love to sew and design and create new things. If this is something you like to do, please subscribe and let me know in the comments below what you like to sew. Today I thought we'd make a tote bag or a small purse using an old sweater and old denim. Now, I haven't pre-made this. I'm going to be making this up as I go, so we're going to figure it all out together. Now, the first thing I want to do is figure out which side of the sweater I want to use on my bag. If I want to use, I don't know if I want to use this side or this side. I think I'm leaning towards this side. So the first thing I want to do is cut the back of this sweater out, and then I'm going to iron on some lightweight stabilizer. This way it'll hold its shape while I'm sewing. Now that I have the stabilizer put on the back, it's just a lightweight stabilizer that I put on just so that it doesn't stretch out of shape while we're working with it. And then for these aren't a full-length pair of jeans, so I'm going to cut across right here. I'm going to go and iron this flat, and I'll be right back. So now that that's pressed, now we have to figure out how big we want to make our bag. So I'm going to go with, let's see, I'll do 14 inches wide on the pieces. So I'm going to mark out 14 inches wide. And I'm going to be going 12 inches high. And I'm cutting that piece in half. Now with this piece, I'm going to cut it as big as I can. 14 inches wide. So right now I'm going to sew these two pieces together. So I've sewed these two pieces together because they're going to be the bottom of the tote bag. And I press down the seam in the middle. Your iron is your best friend when you're sewing. It's really important to iron everything, and it makes a nice looking seam when you've pressed it. And now I'm going to be putting these pieces on each end. So now I'm just going to sew each side here. I've sewn all the pieces here together and I've pressed it down, and I finished the seams with the serger. And if you don't have a serger, you can just go over the edge with a zigzag stitch. And I've cut the lining out. I just I have a piece of cotton here, and I just cut it out to be the same size, and I cut a piece of medium weight stabilizer as well. And we're just going to put that aside, and now we're going to be making the straps. I'm going to use the other pant leg, and I'm going to measure out 6 inches wide. And I'm going to go as long as I can. Now fold that in half, and I'm going to press it down so there's a seam down the middle, and we're going to cut it in half. So now I have 2 straps that are 14 inches long by 3 inches wide, and I'm going to fold them in half and just sew along one side. So I've sewn across each side, and I'm just going to turn them right side out and press them down. So I've decided to make some little straps for the side of the purse we're making, and I'm going to be making a point on this end and sew a little bit and then leave it open and then sew the end. So the first thing I'm going to do, because we want to find the exact middle, I'm going to sew down here. I'm going to just use a small seam allowance. because I want to make sure I find the exact center from the seam. This is how you do it when you're making it up as you go. Now I'm going to measure down so they're both the same. Let's see, we'll measure down an inch. An inch and a quarter, maybe an inch. We'll just measure down an inch. And we'll just make a point. Actually, I should bring that point down a tad because we need a seam allowance. So I'm going to sew down here, and then down here a bit, because I'm going to be cutting into the thread later. Leave an opening here, and I'm going to start sewing down here. Now my only hope is I've guessed the right length for a side strap. If I didn't, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, I guess. So I've made 2 straps, and I've pressed them down, and the sides are opened here. So I'm going to do a top stitch all the way around, and I've switched to a matching thread color. So I finished top stitching the little straps, and we're going to sew those on next before we sew everything together. And I measured in 3.5 inches from the end and 1.5 inches down, and I pinned it together, and I'm just going to sew around the bottom in a little rectangle there on each side just to hold it down, and I'll be right back. So I just sewed on both of these straps here. And we're going to be finishing up these straps since I already have the blue thread in the machine, and this will be the last time we need the blue thread. So we're going to measure down 2 inches from each end. Oh, you know, my husband reminds me, I have a measuring right underneath of me. I don't even need the ruler. So I'm going to take this over to the machine, and I'm going to be just folding it like this, and we're going to be sewing along the edge from each mark, from one end to the other. So now that I've sewn these and left the ends open like that, we're going to put those aside for now, and we're going to start sewing up the bag. So I'm just going to pin this together, fold this in half and pin this together. And then the lining with the stabilizer, we're going to pin that together. And I'm just going to go over to the machine and sew down each side. So I have each side sewn, and now we're going to be drawing in the corners, on each bottom corner, a 1-inch square right above the seam. It's nice to do the corners like this after you've sewn up your sides, because everything will match up better. And you're just going to pull it open. If you want a wider bottom, just do a larger square. This is a 2-inch wide bottom. So if you wanted a 3-inch wide bottom, you'd want your squares to be 1.5 inches. I'm going to go to the machine and sew across each corner. So I've sewn up the corners on each side and sewn a zigzag stitch to reinforce the seams. And I thought that we'd put a zipper on the top of the bag. So we're going to prepare this before we assemble the bag. And I have a 14-inch zipper here. This will be the width of the bag. So I figured that would be long enough. And I cut out 4 strips that are 1.5 inches wide 10 inches long from the same, like matching the same fabric as the lining. I chose to do the lining because I found that this would just be way too thick to put up on top of the bag. And I pressed down just a little bit on each side, just so it would cover the edge. So I switched to a zipper foot, and I have my zipper, and I opened it up, and I have a line marked on each side, so we know that each side will match up when the zipper's closed. And I have a piece of fabric here, like the strip is 1.5 inches wide by 10 inches long, and I press down the end on each one. So you can do this 2 different ways. I'm going to show you the way I'm doing this because it'll be a lot easier for me anyway. So I'm going to line up this piece of fabric to that lining, that line right there, and I'm going to sew as close as I can to the zipper. And now I'm going to go on the other side and take that piece. So the folded end will be like this. And match that up. So I press this open, and now I'm just going to top stitch over the side here. Now for this end here, we don't want to leave it open like that. This is the end where we close it. I'm going to be putting a piece of fabric on that side. And this side. And try to keep this tight together and flat. And we're just going to sew right across. And I'm going to trim the end here. Those scissors don't really work very good on this. So now that I have that sewn together, I'm going to go to my iron and press this down. And I'm also going to press down a little seam on each end like this, and we're going to sew it, and I'm going to sew across the bottom. So what I did was I pressed this down, and I pressed down a little seam on each side, and I'm just going to sew across the bottom. And then we're just going to cut this to make them even on each end. Now this end here, we're going to leave a tail, and I'm going to make a piece that goes across the bottom here. Now for the piece that I'm going to put on the end of the zipper, I'm going to use a little piece of the sweater and a piece of the lining. And I've cut out a piece. This is left over from the strips I had made, so it's 1.5 inches wide. And the piece I made is 3 inches long, but that doesn't matter because we'll probably change that after. So I'm just going to sew around here, 3 sides of it. So now that I have the zipper prepared, I'm just going to cut this to make this even with that. And we'll set that aside for now. The first thing we're going to do is place the straps before we assemble everything. And right here, I've measured the center point and measured out 2 inches from the center on each side and placed the straps. So I basted down each side here of the zipper. I find it easier to stitch things on like this as I go, so nothing gets shifted out of place and it ends up being being done neater. So it's sewn on like this on this side and that on that side. So now we have to put it all down like this. And we're going to put the lining in like this. So this is going to be inside out and this one's going to be right side out. And I'm just going to match up these side seams here. I've stitched around the top and I'm going to pull out the rest of these pins and we're going to turn it right side out. I've pinned closed the opening that we left, and I'm just gonna top stitch all the way around the top here, and that will close up this opening here. So I finished sewing in the zipper. Now, if I were to do this again, and this is what I'd recommend for you to do, is when you're doing the zipper part, do both ends like this instead of doing a closed end like that, like I did. It will make it a lot easier to sew it together. So I would use a longer zipper and then sew these in like both ends like you did this end, and put an end like this on both ends. So the zipper would be like this. I would do that next time because it would make it a lot easier to sew together. I hope that makes sense. And then after I was done sewing in the zipper, I took these and I put them around and I sewed on some buttons just for a little accent, and the bag is all done. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't yet subscribed yet, please subscribe and have a great day. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.